Why would a guy go with a 1.5 power scope? Hey guys, Rex here. We're going to do a couple of different reviews in this quick video. We're going to talk about not only the TAVOR X95, which is something a lot of guys have been asking about for a while. I have been running this for 3/4 of a year or about a year now. And also the TA44, which is something I've ran for a while on other platforms as well, but we had this mounted on here, and people are asking a more detailed opinion on exactly how these things balance out, what the usefulness is. Why would you want to go with a configuration like this as opposed to something else? And so let's get started real quick. Just a brief overview for those who aren't familiar. The TAVOR, it's an Israeli-made carbine in a bullpup design, right? So you got the action back here. You got your ammunition right here. This is where the feed is. And you got your charging handle up front here. And you got your controls up here. So when you're shooting, you got your mag here. And on the new model, the X95 is a newer model. The first one had a mag release, which was back in the rear. So you'd have to kind of relearn your ergonomics if you're used to like an M4 style platform or an M16 style platform growing up, right? On this one, it has similar controls to like an M4. So the mag release switch, for example, is a button up close up here. You hit that and it drops out your magazine, and then you can reload. You do have to kind of relearn ergonomically a little bit to get the magazine in and out of here efficiently if you're not used to a bullpup style platform. I like this better than the FN2000s. It's a lot more rugged in my opinion and a little bit less complex. I do like the feel of it a little better, and it seems to shoot good. And that's just my personal opinion. This is my favorite bullpup design in this cartridge. That I think that you can get this something that's actually a serious weapon that a guy can actually rely on with his life. It's something that is fielded in its original configuration over in some rough places where guys have to use these in real life. So it's actually a good little rifle. One of the nice things about the bullpup designs are they're very, very handy. They're small. So this is really good for like a vehicle weapon, something that you need to be able to pull out and maybe get in front of you, and not have too much length to kind of encumber your success navigating this thing through small places, right? Inside close quarters combat, like in a house or apartment, or clearing like a camper or whatever. You got bad guys coming in through the ventilation ducts or whatever, and you got to sneak around the corner. Yeah, I know. I've watched a lot of movies. I know how this thing goes, right, guys? There's a lot of times when it's nice to have a handy little weapon like this. And so one of the things I was hoping to do with it was to run it silenced. And I was going to put an AAC51 tooth flash hider up here and run an SDN6 on it. However, well, YouTube wouldn't allow such crazy things anymore, so we can't do it for that reason. But also, these things like to be run without a huge amount of overpressure. They're not modular, kind of like an AR is, to where you can really get it tweaked to where it's very reliable and operates in a balanced way. They're a little more tricky to get to work properly with silencers. There's just too much gas power. And plus, it's nice to retain the absolute handiness of it. These things are a little bit loud if you're not using hearing protection, which I would recommend you do anytime you're having fun. But in real life, a lot of times, you might have to just whip it out and start hammering away before you put in your ear pro, right? And so it is kind of loud. That's something that's just a reality. You got a lot of neat features on here. You can push these buttons and move these panels off, and you have places where you can mount your flashlights, your accessories, whatever you got to put on this deal to configure it the way you'd like. So that's nice. However, for myself, I like to keep like a vehicle carbine to be very, very sleek. Nothing attached to it that you absolutely don't need immediately. A flashlight is a good addition to this. I got it on a different rig right now, but this is about as much junk as I want to put on it. So basically we got the weapon itself configured nicely. It's got built-in open sights. They flip up, they're built into the rail up here. So you can flip that up like so and flip her down, and then likewise in the back it's actually underneath here. It's held down by this little optic at the moment. But you have backup sights built into the weapon. It's actually very reliable. We couldn't get it to hang up at all. We couldn't kill its performance. It's actually accurate. We're shooting Fiocchi 55 grain FMJs out of it, which is not like target ammo, but it's a decent ammo, and we're shooting an average of around about 1.5 minutes at 100 yards, and so it's a relatively accurate weapon. Some guys complain that they had less than ideal performance in terms of accuracy on this particular model, and it might be a little bit anecdotal because I don't have a large sample size to go off of in terms of accuracy testing, but it was more than plenty. It averaged, you know, like I said, around 1.5. Some of the groups were around 1 inch, and that's just me goofing around, leaning over a range bag without sandbags, just kind of leaning over the range bag and using this 1.5 power TA44 scope, okay? So I didn't even have any kind of decent magnification to really get it tuned in, but it still shot very well. I would imagine that if I got everything situated for an accuracy test, that it would have shot a little bit better, but I like to test these things in conditions that I'm gonna be using it in real life. And for me, I'm just gonna lean over a bag at the most, maybe lean over the rucksack, shoot offhand, things like that. It's very nicely balanced for shooting offhand. You can kind of use your hand over it's a big trigger guard deal. It's a whole hand guard up front here, and you can hold it and you pull it in real tight. And you can get very, very easy balance on this for offhand shooting.
Hit. Hit. Hit.
That's like too boring. Hold on, let's find something closer. Oh yeah. Let's try the 1,000-yard one.
Get it.
Yep, not so lucky. One of the older models we were testing a while back, I had no problem nailing steel out to 500 yards and a little bit farther offhand if you're kind of used to shooting like that. And so it's something that is very, very nice handling and easy to shoot, something that I actually do kind of like. So that's a brief overview of this weapon. Of course, we can get into more detail if you guys are curious about it, but my overall impression of the X95 is that it's actually a pretty good, reliable weapon. It's certainly reliable. I like the controls better than on the original model, and the accuracy is definitely within the parameters that you need to actually use it in real life and be totally effective without any kind of significant or practical shortcomings. I was originally running an aim point on here. It was a little bit cumbersome. It was a PRO, kind of a larger optic, and those are very reliable. I like them, but I wanted something that would give me a little bit more flexibility in terms of range, and so I decided to try out this TA44, and this is one with the ACSS reticle. A lot of the guys who are in with the channel quite a bit understand the ACSS as the Advanced Combat Sighting System. And it is a reticle that has your ballistic drop compensation built into it and your ranging capabilities. The most important thing when you're shooting beyond a couple hundred yards with any kind of rifle like this is understanding how far the target is. That's your primary input for calculating hold off, right? And so having the ability to do that in the optic is very nice. And it's very simple how it's made. If you look at the reticle, there's a series of horizontal lines towards the bottom part. The width is for bracketing a target that's 18 inches wide, which is going to be from here to here on most bad guys, okay? And so if you bracket him in the corresponding horizontal deal, it'll give you an indication of how far he is that way. Plus, you can stand him with his feet on the very bottom line, and how tall he is for a 5-inch or for a 5-foot 10-inch tall target. That's how far he is as well. And it goes from 300, 400, and 500 yards is how that one is set up. And then you just go to the corresponding spot in the reticle. Because the reticle is trying to stay as clean as possible, they didn't label it with numbers, but the top of the chevron in cartridge like a 5.56, the very top of the chevron, you're gonna zero that at 50 yards or it'll come into contact again at about 200 yards. And then once you get that, if you hold at the bottom of the chevron, that's going to be 300 yards zero, and then the next dot down is 400, and then the dot on the very bottom is 500 yards. And why would a guy go with a 1.5 power scope? especially a Trijicon, when there's the 3.5s available, the 4 powers, and even some larger magnification ranges. Well, on a weapon like this, on a short carbine, I like to retain some of my close range capabilities. And so a lot of guys say it's like, you know, not quite a true red dot type setup because the 1.5 is a little bit larger magnification than just a complete open red dot type design. And so they can't use the bend-in aiming concept as effectively as they could on some of the other setups, just the way the brain is wired. I would say that in all reality, guys, if the 1.5 power is very effective for close range combat. If you're so close that the 1.5 power magnification screws you up, then you can do what they call employ the Biden aiming concept. Joe Biden has a philosophy about shooting. It has to do with double barrel shotguns. You just kind of point at the bad guy and then you hammer away and then it's all done. So employ the Joe Biden aiming concept and don't worry too much about the bend-in deal not being exactly balanced right for this, right? So if the guy's so close you can't use the 1.5, you're just shooting and pointing, okay? And so it's generally not a problem in all practical applications. But when you start getting out there a little bit farther, from 0 to 100 yards, this is a very effective setup. You don't want too much magnification. One of the biggest problems that guys will have is too much magnification on their scope, especially on dynamic moving targets. As targets are squirrely, running away from whatever, and you're trying to engage movers, you need to maintain your field of view. And of course, you're going to keep both eyes open when you're tracking moving targets, but it's nice not to get lost in that magnification. You don't want to be looking through a straw. And from 0 to 100, it's nice to have 1.5 is balanced out very nicely. A lot of guys are very, very effective with an aim point with just a red dot sight, 0 to 300 meters with a 5.56. And you can even shoot farther than that if you've got good vision and you kind of have a little bit of a feel for how much holdover to apply. You know, some guys can hit steel after a shot or two with a with the red dot design scope. However, this particular Trijicon is very nice. This is actually employing the same technology in the full-size ACOGs. This is the Generation 2 compact version of the Trijicon ACOG, and it employs the same mechanical parameters that's in the larger ones. You have a prism assembly, so this is a prismatic scope, and it's right behind where the turrets are. If you look in here, there's the prisms in here. There's a roof prism and a helper prism, and they're kind of arranged in kind of a trapezoid shape with the little angle in here. And they're using Bach 4 and Bach 7 glass from Schott, Germany, which is some of the best glass you can get in the world. So the optical quality of this is incredibly good. A heck of a lot better than looking through some of the red dot designs. So you're not going to lose that. You do have just enough magnification to where you can actually see the features on the reticle, but not too much to crowd you for when you're doing your close work. So one thing that I do like about the TA44 is that it's just enough to see that reticle and the features thereof. See, and it depends on how much of a discerning eye you have. If it's a little bit flooded out because there's too much light, you just get some electrician's tape, and most of the professionals who use these things will tape up this illuminator, because you do have a fiber optic illuminator which brings this polycarbonate tube back into here. And on the top of the roof prism there is a surface that's labeled as Surface G in the patents, and it's actually painted with the silver paint, and that's where the reticle is cut. And this will go to a tritium lamp, which is a radioactive lamp based on tritium gas, and it'll also have a backup, which is the fiber optic. So there's two sources of illumination there, and there's also a reticle that is silver etched into that mirror surface on the prism. So you got three things that are not going to fail. The tritium will eventually go bad, or it'll eventually reach its half-life and kind of decrease in brightness. Actually, it's kind of nice when it gets a little tired. It does calm down a little bit. Some of the guys complain it's a little too bright when it's brand new. The carbon fiber is a great way to continue illumination when it's needed, and then if both those systems for some reason don't give you anything, you still always have the reticle. So you have three different ways that you're going to be able to see your aiming point, whereas like on something like a red dot, if you lose power, that thing is totally done. So for a World War III red dot type scenario optic, where you absolutely can't have the system fail and you want triple redundant like aiming point deals for the optic, the Trijicon is one of the reasons why guys gravitate that way, and also why militaries do as well. It's a real thing that they do consider in the military, trying to stay with analog systems, things that don't depend on batteries, because there are certain things that can happen. If you look on the Eastern Front with the Russians, they would employ potentially at some point tactical nuclear weapons and take out the power. And even anything that's running on a tiny little computer with little diodes or capacitors or any of that kind of stuff is not going to work. And so having an electronics-free option, and especially with sometimes there's possibility of no resupply, is a very nice way to go. Now, how far can you shoot with a 1.5 power Trijicon? Like I said, it's dependent on your eyeballs, how well you can see. If you've got a good discerning eye and you pay very close attention, it's really contingent on the shooter's abilities and his eyesight. So if you've got pretty good vision, you can engage targets using this reticle out to 500 yards very effectively, just with a 1.5 power scope. And they're small in there, but you can range them and engage them with pretty good precision and actually group them in there pretty nicely, even at 500 yards. So a huge part of it is contingent upon how fussy you are with exactly where you're aiming. A lot of guys are very effective, remember, with open sights out to 600 and 800 yards. In fact, when I was a kid, a lot of black powder long-range shooters would use open sights beyond 1,000 yards and be very effective. Actually, every bit as much of as effective as your modern competition shooters are in some cases, where you can put them all in on your hand at like 900 yards with open sights and a black powder rifle. So it's all about how discerning your eye is and what your skill level with that system is. I like this particular setup. It's very small, very handy. The eye relief on this particular Trijicon is actually pretty good. It's like 2.5 inches, almost like 2.4 inches. It's very light. It's like 5.1 ounces. So it's actually a pretty good little design. Some of the small drawbacks are that zeroing it is a little bit of a tedious process at times. The TA44s and even some of the TA31s, they're very, very tiny little adjustment mechanisms, okay? So the Erector Assembly inside this optic is going to be found here. It's going to start up here where the actual adjustment mechanisms are, and it's going to come up into this raised section where the prisms are, okay? And that entire little part inside there is the Erector Assembly, which is pushed on by your adjustment mechanism, the screws. And then on the bottom side, the opposite side of where the screws are, you're going to have your bias assemblies, which are little spring-loaded counter resistance points to kind of push it up. Because of the tininess of this mechanism and some of the geometries involved in the prismatic version of this Erector Assembly, sometimes you have to kind of work it in there. Kind of like your sporting optics you might remember over the counter. You got to zero it, shoot it a few times. It might move a little bit. You got to knock it around with the screwdriver a little bit. You want to make sure your mounting is done properly. I'm using the American Defense mount, which is actually a great way to go. This seems to be taking out a lot of the problems that some guys were misdiagnosing as a scope failure. So if you get a good mount on there like this, it's going to take out a lot of problems. And but when you're getting, it depends on how fussy you are with your zero. I'm pretty fussy. If you can shoot well enough to notice that you're off by like a click, and on this scope, a click is about 1/2 inch at 100 yards, is what the manual says. Not a half minute, but 1/2 inch. Yeah, it's approximately half minute, right? If you're super discerning with your zero, which is a good thing to do, if you can do that, you want to get it just perfect. You might have to wrestle with it just a little bit, fire a few rounds, knock it around a little bit, make sure that everything settles in nicely, just because of the intricacy and small scale. In my opinion, this is my opinion of what's going on the Erector Assembly adjustment mechanisms. And so Trijicon's that's one of their things. Once you get them in though, then it's set. And because you're using the reticle and you're not using turrets to adjust after that, once you get it zeroed, it's good. Another thing to consider too is that the way trajectories are generally shaped, this also works with a 762x39, 6.8 SPC, or 308, depending on exactly how you zero it. And if you read the instructions and the manual for the ACSS reticle when you get these, it just tells you exactly where to zero for different cartridge selection, okay? It's something that's actually totally combat effective to zero, especially within the distances like 500 yards. There's not going to be enough of the variation in the shape of the trajectory curve to throw you off inside that distance, practically speaking, for combat effectiveness. So I think that this is actually a nice little way to go. And I think this is perfectly well suited for like a lightweight carbine. You don't want to add a lot of weight, but you still want the ability to not only master it from 0 to 50 yards, from 50 to 100, but still have that ability at 300, 400, and 500 yards to still precisely put rounds on target where you want them to go. This is not a bad way to go. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the quick review on the combined setup here. We have been shooting a little while. When we do get some more cool footage with this thing, we're gonna run around, engage targets at multiple distances, and we'll definitely share that with you. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you on the next one. Hey guys, Rex here. Thanks for watching the video. It was awesome to have you. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for whenever YouTube cracks down on us. The newsletter can be found at www.rexreviews.org. Subscribe to that newsletter. You'll get updates on any kind of cool stuff, wherever the rendezvous is going to be when the Russians come and invade the place, like on the movie Red Dawn, and all kinds of other fun details like the latest podcast episodes and latest reviews. Do make sure to check out our podcast show. We got lots of hours of incredible content where we're actually allowed to be honest with how we feel about things. We're highly edited on this very highly politicized platform now that YouTube has become. So on our podcast show, we get pretty Western, we have a lot of fun, and we really tell you a lot more detail about our true opinion on the way the world goes. We also talk about all kinds of questions and answers related to long-range shooting, tactical stuff in general, survival, prepping, scenarios, what-if scenarios, all kinds of fun stuff. The podcast is one of the funnest projects we've ever done. Do make sure to check that out. We give you little tiny excerpts here on this YouTube channel, but for the entire full-length shows, which are usually a good 2, 3, 4 hours of incredible content, you're going to want to go to rexreviews.org to find the podcast shows. They're available on SoundCloud and iTunes. If you're looking for some Tier 1 rifle training, please visit rexdefense.com. That's our training hub that will show you our currently scheduled events. If you do want to see us while we're still doing this, go check that out, and we would love to come see you in person, hang out, and get you squared away on the precision rifle.